Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to be talking about the best baits for April bass fishing. It's finally one of my favorite months up here to fish in the Northeast. Besides May and June and October, this is probably one of the best months up here as well. So we're going to break down three of my favorite baits that I really like to fish up here for April bass fishing, and they're all going to have their own little purpose depending upon what type of fish I'm fishing for, where I'm fishing, all that kind of stuff. So what I like to do in April, I like to largemouth fish a little bit if I'm fishing lakes that have some grass, have some laydowns, stuff like that. I also like to smallmouth fish. I'll either go up to Lake Erie, I'll go to some of our natural lakes around here that have smallmouth, and I'll fish for those pre-spawn smallmouth that are really getting up there and getting ready to feed, because they'll spawn first, and that's usually around early May, and then late May you'll start to get some of the largemouth spawning, so you're still catching some very early pre-spawners in April. So my first bait that I'm really going to like to use here is going to be a chatterbait, and it depends. I mean, usually I'm just using this for largemouth bass fishing. Depends on the lake that I'm at. Usually it's our northern natural lakes that have a lot of grass, big expansive grass flats. I'm gonna go and cover a bunch of water with this and try and catch some pre-spawn largemouth that are chasing bluegills in those grass flats and trying to feed up for the spring. A lot of times you also have those warm sunny days, heat up that grass, and those fish will flock to that as well. So that's the types of areas that I'm gonna look for with this chatterbait. I fish two colors pretty much, or two variations of a color. It'll be something white. This is a white and chartreuse. It could just be a plain white. It really doesn't matter. Something with a white bait fish color to it. And then something green pumpkin. So this is Bee Height Delight with a little bit of chartreuse in it. Could be a straight green pumpkin. It could be green pumpkin red, green pumpkin black and blue. That part really doesn't matter. So if I know those fish are really feeding on bluegills, or that water's really clear and those fish are feeding on some natural type colors, bait fish, stuff like that, that's when I'm gonna go with this chatterbait right here. If that water's a little bit dirtier, I know they're feeding on shad. Some of our lakes don't have shad up here, but if you're feeding fish are in the lake that have shad, the water's a little bit dirtier, that's when I'm gonna go with that white color. The biggest thing with this is it's essentially a flat-sided crankbait type bait for grass. So you can reel this through the grass. It does put off a lot of vibration, but it's a very tight wiggle, especially if you use the jackhammers. You don't have to use a jackhammer, but this is the Z-Man jackhammer. If you want to use something else, Z-Man Elites are very good. I've used the Z-Man Customs. Those are the types of baits that I would really like to use if you're trying to save a little bit of money and not spend $16 on a chatterbait like a jackhammer. But the jackhammers do work really well. It really just depends on what your budget is. I've used them all. I've even used the Z-Man original chatterbaits. They all really work. I just like these ones a little bit better because they have some better components, and the fish just really seem to like them, and I like the color selection. Trailer wise, it's going to be a Yamamoto Zaco 10 times out of 10, specifically this time of year. Again, I want that tight shimmy, flat-sided crankbait appearance, and that's what this Zaco is going to do. It's not going to have a big wide tail kick like a swim bait. It's not going to have two claws flapping around like a crawfish. This just has a little shimmy off the back end, and it kind of just vibrates in place with the bait and follows as it goes through the water. It's a trailer that I've used on these jackhammers for a long, long time. I'll continue using it into the future. It just works really, really well on these fish. Early spring, I'm going to use a chatterbait of some type, put that Zaco on there. The only other thing to mention is the sizes that I'm going to use. If I'm fishing like 3 foot or less, probably, I'm going to go with the 3/8 ounce. The 1/2 ounce would just be too heavy and bury you down in that grass. Or if the grass is really thick, you'll go with a lighter chatterbait and be able to flutter it over the tops of the grass. But my go-to size is going to be the 1/2 ounce. That's usually what I'm going to fish. A 1/2 ounce green pumpkin or Bee Height Delight is like my go-to, with a green pumpkin Zaco on there. I catch a ton of northern largemouth on that setup right there every single spring. Now, bait number 2 here is a larger category of baits, and that's because it's going to play for both largemouth and smallmouth. So if I'm largemouth fishing, my go-to pick is this guy right here, the 6th Sense Crush 50X Square Bill. I mentioned a crankbait in the last best baits video. This is a step up from that crankbait, so I went with a flat side in the colder water. Now in April, you're gonna have some warmer water. Those fish are gonna be a lot shallower. They're gonna be a lot more aggressive. that's what I'm gonna go with the square bill, really bounce that thing through cover, get it through those laydowns and try and get some bites doing that. You'll also notice I'm still throwing those red colors. I love this boiled crawfish color. It's like my go-to, but if you have different types of forage in your lake or different water clarities, you can use other types as well. Any type of a shad pattern can work just fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Those always work. Chartreuse blackback, if you have extremely dirty water, as much as the black and red contrast, black and yellow does the exact same thing. So that one works really well if your fish are feeding on shad, but they're very shallow and the water's very dirty. That's a good choice as well. And then if you're fishing ponds or just lakes that have bluegills, a bluegill color could work really good too. I carry a lot of bluegill square bills. That's usually something I fish later in the year, like June, late May time frame, when those fish are, the bluegills are spawning. But nothing says they won't eat a bluegill in the springtime when they're feeding up. So that's an excellent choice there. And then if I'm smallmouth fishing, I've really started to like throwing mid-depth crankbaits in like that 8 to 12 foot range for smallmouth bass this time of year. I'll go up to Lake Erie, I'll go to different places that those fish get just a little off the bank, and I'll fish these bright colors. Whether they mimic crawfish, I think they mimic perch is the biggest thing when I go up to like Lake Erie. You have that bright color on the side, your yellows, your orange, and your black stripes, and I think they honestly just think it's a perch. Or they don't think it's anything, and smallmouth just really like bright colors. But that mid-depth crankbait, fishing in those mid-depth ranges where those fish are staging up to go pre-spawn or to go actually spawn. So baits like the 6th Sense Curve right here, that's an excellent one. That's about an 8-foot diver. So my new favorite has been this guy right here, the C6, boiled crawfish again. Think it's a perch, think it's contrast, whatever you might be, smallmouth or sight feeders. So if they can see this thing from a long ways away, they'll come get it. This one's about an 8-foot diver as well. And then if you need a bait to get down in that little bit deeper depth range, the C10 or the 250 MD is an excellent bait as well. Those are all great options for smallmouth fishing. I catch a ton of fish in the springtime crankbait fishing for smallmouth, and it's the most exciting bite ever. They will rip the rod right out of your hand. They hit it so hard. They'll track those baits down. You can draw whole schools of fish with that bright colored bait. I've seen it happen on live scope when I'm fishing these places. You'll be reeling that crankbait and just massive schools of smallmouth are chasing that thing back to the boat. It's a very cool sight to watch, and it's an awesome way to catch them in the springtime. Which brings me to my last bait. When I find those massive schools, usually I look for them with that crankbait, then I want to tear them apart and catch as many as I can, and that's going to be done with the Finesse swim bait. I've talked about this numerous times on my channel. It's one of my favorite baits for fishing in general, but especially for smallmouth bass. My setup that I usually go with, these are the 6th Sense Finesse swim bait heads here, so this is a 5/16 ounce. I also have a 3/16 ounce, somewhere in that range is what I'm gonna fish. You know, I usually like a 1/4 ounce jig head. I used to pour my own ball head jigs. Really whatever you can get. Something with a 1 or a 2/0 light wire hook in it in that 1/4 ounce size range. I'm gonna put it on a spinning rod or a light casting rod, throw that thing out there, let it sink all the way to the bottom, and just wind it in as slow as I can. That's the way I like to fish it. I have a Divine 3.2 swim bait on here. That is my absolute favorite swim bait right now for fishing for smallmouth bass. The reason being, I like it even more than the 3.8 because they put less plastic in it. The way that it's designed, the tail has less plastic. So even though it's the same plastic being used across the baits, this one wobbles at slower speeds. So I can really drag that thing on the bottom and still get that tail kick. Where if you're using a 3.8, I do like that bait as well, but for different reasons. I really don't like using it for smallmouth very much because it doesn't have that tail kick at a slower speed. I'll use that more for largemouth fishing. I'll use it for jig trailers, swim jig trailers, stuff like that, where you're fishing that bait a little bit faster. But when you want that slow speed, which is what you need when that water's cold and those fish are pre-spawn and you want to keep it in the strike zone a very long time, the 3.2 is a great choice. It swims very slow. I've even used the 2.7 as well. It has even less plastic in it, but it's a much smaller bait. So when I'm fishing up on Lake Erie looking for some like trophy smallmouth, this is the perfect mix of size and fishability. So those are the baits that I really like to fish this time of year. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and if you'd like to support the channel, if you purchase any of the 6th Sense baits or anything on their website, if you use my code Quince, you'll save 10% off your whole order. You'll be saving a ton of money for yourself, and you'll be helping out the channel a ton to be able to make more videos like this for you guys. Check this video out right here for the March baits edition of this same series. Hit that subscribe button down below, and thanks for watching.